Hello everyone, Chris Clamp here and welcome to my studio. So today I want to talk with you a bit more about the use of photography and fine art, or better yet, how to use photography in your painting or drawing in your studio. But first, before we dive in, I just want to say thank you to all the new subscribers and all the people that have really been watching videos lately. You guys are blowing me away. It's so exciting to see the channel grow. I'm going to be putting out some amazing content for you all, so please stay tuned for what's next. Hit the subscribe button and the notification button if you haven't already, and you're gonna want to stay tuned. I have some big things in store. So anyway, let's dive into today's video. So the use of photography in drawing and painting is something that's actually a little controversial. When I was in art school, there were a lot of classes, teachers, and my peers even, that would look down on the use of photography. Everything was much more serious if you were actually working from a model or from a still life or something like that. It was a big no-no to use a photograph in a classroom assignment. However, there are good ways in which you can use a photograph. It was very controversial. Like if someone found out that you were using a photograph or you had used it as a reference material, you definitely got ripped apart in a critique with your work of art. Now, you didn't want your artwork to look like you may have used some sort of photographic reference when you were creating it, but obviously you may have used some sort of photograph to help you compose it or something like that. And you know what? That's quite all right. Photography has actually been used in art and painting for a long time. I mean, since this medium has actually existed. Whenever you look at the works of Edgar Degas, for example, the ballet dancers, Degas was fascinated with the use of photography, and he actually used reference materials from photographs. The same can be said about a lot of the Impressionist artists at that time. Whenever photography was out and just kind of hitting the scene, they looked at the potential in which they could use the photograph to help them create and compose an image. Now, there is a better way to do this, and that is where I want to talk about the use of photography in this episode today. So all of you have a smartphone or something similar to a smartphone these days, I'm sure, in which there's a camera and you can take snapshots of things around, from beautiful sunsets to panoramic vistas to your children, your dogs, cats, whatever. And that's awesome. Those are great snapshots, and the cameras on these phones are amazing. I mean, I'm recording on my iPhone right now and shooting in 4K and everything. I mean, it's crazy what these things can do. However, what you have to be careful of is a lot of these cameras are fully automatic. What that means is you can take a snapshot and the camera is adjusting exposure, aperture, color temperature, ISO, all of this stuff on the spot, and then even applying a filter to that to give you the best image that it thinks that you might want. Now, of course, you can go into your editing settings and adjust the settings on the photograph and tweak it, make it look better and all that. That's good. I love that. Excellent. However, whenever using a photograph for your drawing or painting, there is a better way to do it. And it's better to do it with the most intention. Now, I love a snapshot and I've got a camera roll full of them on my phone. But when I look at them and I really start to analyze them critically, I know that they aren't quite right for a painting. I use a lot of photographs in my source material, and I know a ton of artists out there that do as well, from realists, photorealists, to landscape artists, to portrait painters. I mean, you name it. I mean, think about it. As a portrait artist, you were hired to paint someone's portrait. They're not going to be able to come to you or you go to them and you sit for multiple sessions. Most portrait artists I know might travel to their client, or their client will travel to them, and they will do a basic color study on site and take amazing digital images that they will then finish in their studio, and the painting looks great. Now, the photos that they are taking from the sitter to finish the painting, I'm sure they're not using their iPhone. Even though their phone can take amazing photographs, the phone is going to do some weird things that can actually complicate what's going on when you get to your studio. Therefore, I hesitate recommending using your cell phone to take photos that will serve as reference images for your artwork. I mean, it's one thing to use them as studies or a way to kind of plan something out, but if you're going to actually use that image to help you with your painting, your drawing, whatever the case is, you need to have a little bit more intention about it, a little more planning, and a little more control. What I recommend is use an actual digital camera with an interchangeable lens. They used to call these DSLRs, and I guess they're still called that, meaning a digital single lens reflex. The DSLR actually referred to the mirror. It's a digital version of an SLR camera that has a mirror inside that kind of moves, that exposes light to your film back in the day, but now it's to the sensor. Well, a lot of cameras today are mirrorless, so they aren't exactly DSLRs. So that's my recommendation, is to get a good quality digital camera with interchangeable lenses. Now, why do we want interchangeable lenses? I mean, your cell phone probably has like 3 on the back of it, right? But many of the things that your camera's lenses are performing are things you do not want. For example, have you ever taken a photograph of, say, a street, you know, with a lot of buildings, and the buildings are arced in some way, like above you? Well, there's a lot of weird things happening with perspective distortion. Or say you look and you notice that the image is actually bowing in or out. Now that is called barrel distortion or pushpin distortion. So these distortion things are something that happens because of the lens, essentially, and it looks awful. But when you take the picture, a lot of times you don't realize it, you don't know it. You just took the picture, you look at it, there it is, it looks great. But if you use that image as your image to draw from or paint from, that distortion that happens in your digital image is now going to be in your painting or drawing. Here's an image I'm showing you now that shows a variety of different images of someone's face. It looks very interesting, as you can tell. And this is the same person, but you see how different their face looks by using different lenses, okay? And it also matters how far away the lens is from the sitter in this case. Well, that's why you want different lenses, because if you have a wide angle lens, it's going to create even more distortion. And a lot of the lenses on your camera are wide angle lenses, or it might kind of flip to that whenever you start to zoom in or out a certain way. So when you have a digital camera that has interchangeable lenses, you can put on an appropriate lens that's going to capture what you want best. But what I recommend with your digital camera that has an interchangeable lens is you should aim for a prime lens. What that means is the lens does not have any zoom capabilities. You put the lens on your camera, and whenever you want to actually see more or less of your subject, you physically move the camera back and forth from your subject. You don't twist something on the lens to make it move in and out. These lenses have less distortion than other lenses. You can also get really good quality prime lenses that are actually manufactured to reduce the amount of distortion. Now, this is a game changer. Whenever you're using a digital camera with the right lens, you're going to get a better image, and you're going to be able to use this as reference and be able to see more clearly, more accurately what your subject is. However, I will caution you this. Your eye is still going to be the best reference out there. So whenever possible, work from life, work from a model, work from your sitter. That's why I mentioned earlier that a portrait artist might do an actual sitting at first, maybe do a small study of their client before taking other reference images and using those in the studio away from the client. You're going to understand things so much more and so much more accurately than trusting in the photograph. It's crucial to be able to control it as much as you can on the actual image capturing part, taking the photograph with your camera. Having the right lens, like I said, is huge. Well, another huge part of that is having that camera on a tripod. You need to have your camera on a tripod. So that way there's less movement going on and you're not going to blur your image in any way. Everything is exactly stationary, stable, where you want it to be. It's all controlled. And whenever you have it locked down on a tripod, there's a few other settings you might want to look at controlling on your camera. ISO is a huge one. The lower your ISO, the more information and detail you're going to capture. The higher, less information and less detail. Things might become more grainy in your image, but they're going to be faster, and you might be able to catch that photograph in low light. Another setting you'll want to have control over on your camera is the aperture. And the aperture is the actual opening in your lens. The amount of opening that you have in your lens that allows the light to come through can actually control a little bit of distortion that you may see in your image. So what I found is an aperture of f11 is the aperture that is the most consistent across your image. It seems to be the most flat and has the most information from corner to corner. Now you can adjust your shutter speed from there. That can be wherever it needs to be. But what I'm telling you is target f11, get your ISO as low as possible, and then adjust your shutter speed to get the lighting wherever you need to be. You might have to bracket your photographs, meaning shoot some that are a little bit more exposed and some that are a little less exposed with light to get the information and the shadows and the highlights. Now we've talked a lot about your camera, but there's a few other settings that you need to be aware of to adjust within your camera settings. So you'll want to make sure that you are photographing all of your images in RAW format. Now what RAW format is capturing the raw information with all the light information. It's non-destructive. So when you open this image on your computer, you'll be able to manipulate it and adjust it in the best way possible. You will not be losing information. A lot of digital cameras will photograph images in JPEG format. Now JPEG format compresses the information, and so what happens is you lose information in terms of color, light, and shadow. The other thing you may need to adjust is your white balance setting. So that way your color is more accurate in the image. Things aren't too yellow or too warm or too magenta or too cool. So you'll want to adjust your white balance settings within your camera. Your white balance is something you can adjust on your computer whenever you open your RAW image in your editing software. But I find it best to go ahead and adjust these things in your camera so they're a bit more controlled while you can. Now that we have all of this information, we've taken our RAW file, we've have it balanced with a white balance. We shot it on our digital camera with a prime lens. We had it on a tripod. We used f11 as our aperture. We had a low ISO and adjusted our shutter speed to balance the light properly, even bracketing to have a few images to work from. So we have all this stuff covered. We have great images that we carefully composed on our camera. Now what? Well, you'll want to open those in the photo editing application of your choice. Many of you probably use Adobe Photoshop, but there are a variety of different things out there that you can do this in. And I'm happy to talk through many of them. I know the software pretty well. I've used a lot of it through the years. One of the things that I like to do first when I open my image in my software is crop it. And what you can do typically within your cropping tool is straighten it So that way if the camera is just a little off angle, I can straighten it back up. And then another thing I might do is make a few notes about if there are things that are out of square in the image, because still, I mean, even though we're using prime lens, things are on a tripod and everything, there might be something that's just not quite right. It's a little distorted. A lot of editing software allows you to distort the image, meaning that you can pull something from a corner out and correct it. And we can correct these things from this photograph that I showed you earlier, such as barrel distortion, perspective distortion, and pin cushion distortion. That's a tough word to say. Anyway, these are some of the things I do first, is correct any strange distortions from there. Once I've corrected the image with any distortion I may have, one thing I'm going to do immediately is save it in whatever the software format is. So for example, if I'm working in Photoshop, I'll save it as a Photoshop file, which I think is a PSD, or I'll save it as a TIFF file, because a TIFF file is also not compressed like a JPEG. So a TIFF is a pretty basic one that we can all use, and it also allows you to save things in layers in case your color adjustments are on a separate layer. I'll get into that another day when we talk about software. Now, one last thing, and this could be, again, something we cover in the thing when I talk about software a bit more. In case you are going to print this image and use your printout as some way to make a transfer, whether it's an oil paint transfer like I demoed in this video I've linked here, it's also linked below, or you're doing a transfer with charcoal or pastel. Whatever it is you're using, you will want to save the image size properly. So when you open your file, there should be an area in whatever software you're using where you can change the image size. You will want to make sure that the resolution is at least 300 dpi, which means dots per inch, or ppi. That was a term they used to use, which was essentially pixels per inch. But 300 is the minimum, because that is like an industry standard number in which we no longer see pixels or the printed dot with our eye. Once you have it there changed to a resolution of 300, you'll then change it to whatever you need in terms of the height and width, in terms of inches, whatever you're going to print out on your printer. But these are things to be aware of. We will discuss this in a future video, so please stay tuned. Okay, I know we've discussed a lot today. I didn't mean to go this deep into digital photography. I've had a few people that have made some comments about my video on photographs and transferring them to a canvas. I know that photography is a controversial thing, but it is something that has been around a long time, and it is a tool that we all should be able to understand and use if we choose to use it. But my advice to you is to do these things, control it, and do it with intention, with a better camera, better lens, better setup, than to use a simple snapshot that you've taken that's going to be a little inaccurate and distorted. You're going to get a better image, and you're going to be happier with the results. If you all like this video, please click the like button and leave any comments below if it was helpful, or if you have any questions or anything like that that you would like to ask. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so as well, and click that little bell so you get a notification when some new things come out. I've been doing live streams recently on paintings that are on my easel, and I've been having a blast doing that. So thank you all that have been coming out and spending time with me in the studio. If you've missed those, just keep your eyes peeled. You can also check out the videos on demand on the live tab in my channel. Anyway, I appreciate all of you for being here and all of your watch time, and for subscribing to the channel. You guys have been blowing me away recently. I'm so honored. Thank you all. I look forward to seeing you again in the next video. Have a great weekend.